In a quiet corner of the countryside, nestled between rolling hills and vibrant fields, lived a farmer named Sam. For Sam, farming was not just a job, it was a way of life. From the moment he inherited his family's land, he felt an unbreakable bond with the earth beneath his feet. The land spoke to him in whispers carried by the wind, and every season brought new stories to tell. Each sunrise painted the sky in hues of orange and gold, and each sunset offered a moment of reflection as he watched over his crops. Sam was passionate about sustainable farming practices. Rather than following conventional methods that often depleted the soil and harmed the environment, he embraced organic farming techniques that nurture the land. He believed that good farming wasn't just about producing food, it was about cultivating harmony with nature. His fields were alive with biodiversity. Wildflowers danced among the crops, bees buzzed from bloom to bloom, and birds flitted through the trees that bordered his property. For him, this wasn't just agriculture, it was stewardship. Over the years, Sam implemented various innovative practices on his farm. He rotated his crops, used compost made from kitchen scraps and yard waste, and even installed rainwater collection systems to reduce reliance on municipal water sources. His approach attracted attention from local environmental groups and neighbors who admired his commitment to preserving the land for future generations. Families would visit to pick their own fruits during harvest season, enjoying the fresh air and learning about sustainable practices from Sam himself. But Sam's peaceful existence was about to be disrupted in ways he could never have imagined. A few miles down the road, a new development came to life, a housing community designed for families seeking a serene escape from urban life. This neighborhood boasted manicured lawns, cookie-cutter homes, and an array of amenities aimed at attracting buyers looking for a pastoral retreat. However, with this development came an unwelcome entity, a homeowners association, or HOA. At first glance, the HOA seemed harmless enough, promising to maintain property values and enforce community standards. However, as Sam would soon discover, their definition of community standards clashed dramatically with his way of life. It didn't take long for complaints to start pouring in regarding everything from the perceived messiness of his farm to the occasional clucking of chickens echoing through the neighborhood. The HOA's members were well-meaning but misinformed individuals who had traded city living for country charm without fully grasping what that entailed. They envisioned picturesque scenery devoid of any signs of rural chaos, which apparently included Sam's thriving farm full of crops and animals. What they saw as an eyesore or inconvenience, Sam viewed as life itself, an ecosystem bustling with activity and purpose. Initially, Sam attempted to engage with them amicably. He invited HOA representatives to tour his farm, hoping they would understand his dedication to sustainable practices and appreciate the beauty of rural life. He shared stories about how he had revived tired soil through organic farming methods and explained how vital biodiversity was not just for his farm but for the ecological health of their entire area. However, rather than fostering understanding, these efforts only seemed to exacerbate tensions. The HOA continued to issue warnings about fines for alleged violations, complaints about everything from untrimmed hedges to excessive wildlife on his property began to mount. Each letter felt like a dagger aimed at his way of life, leaving Sam frustrated and bewildered. As weeks turned into months, it became clear that dialogue was futile. Their vision of a pristine neighborhood did not include him or his beloved farm. The more they pushed back against him, the more determined he became to stand his ground. He believed wholeheartedly in what he was doing, not just for himself but for future generations who might one day walk the same soil he cherished. However, this conflict would prove more than just an annoyance. It began to weigh heavily on Sam's spirit. The idyllic lifestyle he had built, a sanctuary where hard work met harmony with nature, was now under threat from an entitled group determined to impose their will upon him. In this time of mounting frustration and pressure from the HOA, one thing became increasingly clear. Sam would have to fight back in a way that no one could anticipate, a way that would turn this battle over land use into something far more dramatic than anyone ever expected. Little did they know that behind his calm demeanor lay a resolve that would soon lead him down an uncharted path toward retaliation that would leave them all in shock. The arrival of the new housing community marked a turning point in the quiet rhythm of rural life surrounding Sam's farm. As the first families settled into their freshly painted homes, excitement filled the air, mingling with the scent of new grass and freshly baked bread wafting from kitchens. However, beneath this picturesque facade, trouble was brewing. The Homeowners Association, or HOA, formed almost immediately, driven by a desire to maintain order and uniformity within their idyllic neighborhood. At first, the HOA focused on establishing basic rules, regulations governing lawn care, fencing styles, and even paint colors for houses. Their intentions seemed noble enough, creating a cohesive community where property values remained stable and aesthetics were preserved. Yet soon enough, their gaze shifted beyond their own properties and towards Sam's farm just a stone's throw away. It started subtly. A few members would stroll past Sam's land during their evening walks, glancing disapprovingly at the rows of vegetables flourishing under his care. They marveled at the wildflowers that dotted his fields, but frowned upon the occasional sight of chickens pecking at the earth or the gentle sounds of cows mooing in the distance. To them, these signs of life were unwelcome disruptions in an otherwise serene environment. The first complaint arrived in Sam's mailbox shortly after he noticed the increasing frequency of HOA members passing by his property. It was an official notice outlining several violations regarding his farm's appearance. The letter claimed that the sight of his tools scattered around and the presence of farm equipment were detracting from the neighborhood's charm. They insisted that his crops resembled untamed wildness, rather than the curated beauty they envisioned for their community. Initially taken aback, Sam read through the letter multiple times, trying to comprehend how his hard work could be perceived as a nuisance rather than a blessing. The sight of healthy plants stretching toward the sun and animals roaming free should have been celebrated as part of rural living. Instead, he felt like an intruder in a realm he had called home for years. As days passed, more complaints followed suit. The HOA members began to report noise disturbances, specifically highlighting the sounds of clucking chickens and the occasional bleat from goats. They claimed these noises disrupted their peaceful evenings and took away from the tranquility they sought when moving to the countryside. Sam couldn't help but chuckle at the irony. After all, he had lived there long before they arrived, and those sounds were simply part of the fabric of rural life. With each letter that arrived, tension escalated further. Sam attempted to reach out to the HOA, offering to discuss their concerns over coffee or perhaps even invite them for a tour of his farm. He believed that once they saw how he operated, how much care he put into nurturing both his crops and animals, they might understand that his lifestyle was not only sustainable, but also enriching for everyone in the area. However, instead of engaging in constructive dialogue, many HOA members dug in their heels. They drafted stricter regulations aimed specifically at curtailing farming activities near residential properties. In their minds, something needed to be done to preserve what they deemed as the ideal living environment. It was clear they saw him not as a neighbor, but as an adversary, an unwelcome blemish on their pristine vision. In response to these escalating complaints, Sam's frustrations grew alongside his resolve. He had always cherished this land. The very soil that nourished his crops had been tended by generations before him. He envisioned a community where diverse lifestyles could coexist harmoniously, but it became increasingly evident that this was not what the HOA wanted. Word spread among neighbors who were sympathetic to Sam's plight but felt powerless against the seemingly insurmountable authority of the HOA. Some admired his commitment to sustainable practices and even praised him for having such vibrant life on his farm. However, they hesitated to stand up openly against an organization that wielded such influence over property values and neighborhood standards. As months rolled by, rather than finding common ground with these newcomers, Sam felt isolated and alienated on his own land, a feeling completely foreign to him after years of nurturing relationships with fellow farmers and local residents who appreciated what he brought to their community. The conflict reached a boiling point when an HOA meeting was announced with a specific agenda item, addressing agricultural nuisances. Sam knew he had to attend. It was time for him to confront the situation head-on. He prepared himself for what lay ahead, readying arguments about sustainability, community spirit, and respect for each other's way of life. The stakes were higher than ever. It felt like a battle not just over land use, but over identity itself, the essence of who he was as a farmer versus who these new neighbors believed he should be. Little did he know that this confrontation would set into motion a chain reaction, leading him down an unexpected path. A path where tensions would ultimately explode into chaos and leave everyone questioning how far they were willing to go for their beliefs. As the weeks turned into months, the tensions between Sam and the H escalated rapidly, morphing from simple disagreements over aesthetics to a full-blown battle that threatened to upend everything he had worked for. The initial complaints that flooded his mailbox soon transformed into a barrage of threats, each more severe than the last. The HOA seemed relentless in their pursuit to impose their vision of order on his farm, and Sam found himself on the defensive, fighting for both his livelihood and his right to exist peacefully in his own community. The first major escalation occurred when Sam received a letter informing him of a fine, an outrageous sum that felt more like a punishment than a legitimate penalty. It stated that he was being penalized for unapproved agricultural activities and insisted that he remove all livestock from his property within 30 days. To Sam, this felt like an outright attack on his way of life. He could hardly believe that raising chickens and goats, a practice as old as farming itself, was now considered unacceptable in the eyes of these new neighbors. Determined not to back down, Sam decided to attend the next HOA meeting, hoping to present his case directly to the board. He prepared thoroughly, gathering data on sustainable farming practices, testimonials from local experts, and even printed out pictures of thriving farms in similar communities that embraced agricultural diversity. Armed with facts and passion, he stepped into the meeting feeling hopeful. However, what he encountered was far from supportive. The atmosphere was charged with hostility as HOA members took turns expressing their grievances about his farm in increasingly aggressive tones. They accused him of ruining property values, disrupting their quiet lives with noise and odors, and generally being a poor neighbor. Each accusation felt like a dagger aimed at his heart. When it was finally Sam's turn to speak, he poured out his heart, explaining how farming was not just his livelihood but also an integral part of who he was, a tradition passed down through generations. He advocated for coexistence, urging the board to reconsider their stance on farming within the community. Yet, as he spoke, it became painfully clear that they were not interested in compromise. They had already made up their minds. Afterward, the HOA issued another letter reinforcing their demands for him to comply with their regulations or face escalating fines. This time they included ominous warnings about potential legal action should he fail to comply. The thought of facing a lawsuit sent waves of anxiety through Sam. He had never been involved in anything remotely resembling legal proceedings before. With every passing week, the situation grew more intense. The HOA began sending inspectors to monitor his farm regularly, armed with clipboards and cameras, as if they were documenting evidence of some heinous crime, rather than assessing a small family-run operation. They scrutinized every detail: his barn's paint job, the condition of fences around his land, and even the layout of crops, as if searching for any minor infraction they could use against him. Sam's frustration mounted as he received yet another notice claiming that he was in violation of noise ordinances due to excessive animal sounds, which they described as disturbing the peace during evening hours. It felt absurd. How could one argue against nature's rhythms? He wondered if these people had ever truly experienced life on a farm, or if they simply saw it as an inconvenience. Feeling cornered, Sam reached out to fellow farmers and community members for support. Some offered advice based on their own experiences with HOAs, while others provided moral backing, reminding him that many local residents appreciated what he brought to the area. But despite this encouragement, facing off against such an organized group felt daunting. The tipping point came when Sam received yet another notice threatening legal action against him if he didn't comply with their demands. This time it outlined specific timelines for removing livestock and restricting further agricultural activities, a directive that would effectively strip away his ability to operate his farm entirely. It was as if they were trying to erase not just his business but also a part of who he was. In response to this relentless pressure, Sam decided enough was enough. He knew he couldn't allow them to bully him into submission or strip away something so vital from his life without putting up a fight. He began devising a plan, not just for how to resist their demands, but also how to turn the tables on them. He gathered documents proving compliance with state regulations regarding farming and animal husbandry, and started building alliances with sympathetic neighbors who shared his vision for a diverse community where different lifestyles could coexist. Meetings were held in secrecy among those who supported him, farmers who faced similar issues or residents disillusioned by the HOA's overreach. Sam realized that this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about standing up for every farmer whose way of life could be threatened by entitled newcomers determined to impose their standards without understanding or appreciating rural traditions. As tensions continued to rise between him and the HO, one thing became clear. This conflict would not end quietly. Little did anyone know that Sam's resolve would soon lead him down a path filled with unexpected consequences, where humor met chaos in ways no one could have predicted. In this fight against intimidation and control over his land, Sam would uncover just how far he was willing to go, and how much those who underestimated him would soon regret their decisions. The tension between Sam and the HOA had been simmering for months, but was one particular incident that would serve as the breaking point, pushing him beyond his limits. It happened on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday morning, the sun shining brightly as Sam tended to his crops, the familiar sounds of farm life surrounding him. He was in the middle of feeding his chickens when he noticed a black SUV parked near the entrance to his property. A chill ran down his spine as he recognized the vehicle. It belonged to one of the more aggressive members of the HO, a woman named Margaret who seemed to have taken a personal interest in his farm. As she stepped out of the car, clipboard in hand, Sam felt an uneasy knot form in his stomach. He straightened up, wiping his hands on his jeans and preparing for yet another confrontation. Margaret approached with a determined stride, her expression tight with disapproval. "Sam," she called out, her voice dripping with condescension, "we need to talk about your latest violations." He took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "What violations are you referring to this time?" he asked, though he could already guess what was coming. She flipped through her clipboard, pulling out a sheet of paper adorned with bold letters, "Final Notice." "It seems you've ignored our previous warnings regarding your livestock," she stated. "We received multiple complaints about noise disturbances during early morning hours. You're officially being fined for noncompliance." Sam's heart sank as he read the number at the bottom of the notice, an outrageous sum that felt more like a punishment than a legitimate fine. "This is absurd," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Chickens make noise. That's what they do. They're not meant to be quiet little pets." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "That might be true, but this isn't just about you and your farm. It's about maintaining peace in our community. You need to understand that your way of life is disrupting ours." At that moment, something inside Sam snapped. It wasn't just about the fine. It was about how they continually dismissed everything he stood for: the hard work, commitment to sustainable living, and his right to exist peacefully in his own home. "You don't get it at all," he shot back. "This land has been farmed for generations. I'm not going to let you bully me into abandoning my way of life." Margaret crossed her arms defiantly, unyielding in her stance. "If you don't comply with our regulations within 30 days, we will escalate this further, potentially involving legal action." The threat hung in the air like a dark cloud. As she turned to leave, Sam felt an overwhelming mix of anger and frustration boiling over within him. He watched her drive away, fury surging through him like wildfire. This wasn't just about chickens or fines. It felt deeply personal, a direct assault on everything he loved. That evening, Sam sat on his porch watching the sunset paint vibrant hues across the sky, colors that seemed so far removed from the grayness that had invaded his life in recent months. He felt a sense of injustice washing over him and couldn't shake off the feeling that he was fighting against something much larger than himself. Unable to contain his emotions any longer, he began pacing back and forth on the porch as thoughts spiraled through his mind. Thoughts filled with images of all those farm-fresh memories. Teaching kids how to plant seeds, watching animals graze peacefully, and sharing laughter with neighbors during harvest festivals. These were moments worth fighting for. In a moment of clarity and determination fueled by anger, Sam decided that enough was enough. He would not allow this HOA to dictate how he lived or stripped away everything that made him who he was. He would fight back, not just for himself, but for every farmer who might face similar intimidation tactics from entitled newcomers. As night descended upon the farm and crickets began their nightly serenade, Sam sat down at his kitchen table and started brainstorming ideas for how to turn this situation around. It seemed ludicrous at first, his thoughts darting between practical solutions and wild fantasies, but then an absurd idea began forming in his mind. What if he were to stage a dramatic response? Something no one would expect. With each passing moment, however outrageous it sounded, Sam could feel a sense of resolve building within him, a plan that would show not only Margaret but also the entire HOA that they had underestimated him. It wouldn't just be about fighting back, it would be about making a statement loud enough for everyone to hear. As sleep eluded him that night, Sam knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next would shake up their world in ways they could never anticipate. The breaking point had been reached. Now it was time for action, a bold move against an organization intent on crushing his spirit and silencing his voice. Little did they know that their relentless pursuit would soon lead to consequences far beyond anything they could have imagined. After the confrontation with Margaret, Sam felt a surge of determination mixed with a heavy dose of frustration. As he paced around his living room, the weight of the HOA's incessant demands loomed over him like storm clouds ready to unleash their fury. He needed a solution, something bold, something that would send a message loud and clear. But what could he do? The idea that began to form in his mind was so outrageous, so surreal, that it almost made him laugh out loud. In an attempt to lighten the mood amid his mounting frustrations, Sam leaned back in his chair and began to brainstorm with a mixture of hyperbole and humor. What if I called it an airstrike? He chuckled to himself, picturing an actual military operation taking place right above his fields. The image of fighter jets swooping down and unleashing their payloads on the HOA's pristine neighborhood sent a wave of absurdity crashing over him. He imagined the scene vividly, a dramatic sky filled with roaring jets, their pilots decked out in aviators and leather jackets, executing precision maneuvers as they targeted the HOA headquarters. Attention homeowners! He could hear the pilot announcing through comically exaggerated loudspeakers. Prepare for a taste of true rural living. Sam burst into laughter at the thought. It was ridiculous, even ludicrous, but there was something cathartic about envisioning such an extreme response to what felt like unending torment. The idea morphed into a full-blown fantasy where he envisioned himself as the hero of his own story, rallying fellow farmers and neighbors to join him in this whimsical uprising against HOA tyranny. What if I didn't just call in an airstrike? What if I got creative? He mused, weaving together a tapestry of hyperbolic ideas that spilled out like popcorn from an overflowing bowl. Maybe I could hire a flock of drones to shower them with organic tomatoes. Or perhaps I could stage an elaborate farm day festival right on their doorstep, complete with live animals, hay bales, and good old country music blaring at full volume. As he jotted down these outrageous ideas on a notepad, each suggestion became more ridiculous than the last. A mock battle between farmers armed with pitchforks versus HOA members wielding clipboards and legal documents. The absurdity of it all transformed Sam's frustration into a feeling of empowerment. He realized that while he might not be able to literally call in an airstrike, there was power in humor and creativity. The more he laughed at these thoughts, the more emboldened he felt. Maybe this was exactly what he needed, a way to reclaim his dignity and inject some levity into a dire situation. It didn't take long before one particular idea stood out among the rest, a staged airstrike event of his own making. Rather than actual bombs falling from the sky, it would be an artistic display meant to symbolize his resistance, an over-the-top spectacle designed to draw attention to his plight while poking fun at how absurd the whole situation had become. Sam imagined setting up giant inflatable planes on his farm, complete with colorful banners proclaiming slogans like, "Down with HO," and "Farming is freedom." He pictured inviting friends and supporters from the community for a day of festivities, live music, farm tours, veggie-themed games, and even mock battles where participants would throw rubber chickens instead of grenades. It would be both a demonstration and a celebration, a humorous way to show just how serious he was about standing up for his rights. The more he fleshed out this concept in his mind, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about mockery. It was about claiming his identity back from those who sought to erase it. It was about community spirit and showing others that they didn't have to stand idly by while entitled newcomers dictated their lives. With newfound energy coursing through him, Sam set about organizing this unconventional event. He reached out to fellow farmers who had faced similar challenges from HOAs, inviting them to join forces for what he dubbed the Airstrike against HOA Day. Word spread quickly through social media channels as people rallied around the idea, a grassroots movement fueled by laughter and camaraderie. As excitement built leading up to the big day, Sam found himself laughing again, not just at the absurdity of it all, but also at how far things had come since that initial confrontation with Margaret. This wouldn't just be an airstrike, it would be a statement, a testament to resilience against unreasonable demands and a celebration of everything that made rural life vibrant. Finally, as the day approached with all its promise of hilarity and rebellion, Sam felt ready, not just for entertainment but for genuine connection with everyone who believed in standing up against injustice. The laughter shared amidst outrageous antics would serve as a reminder that sometimes humor is the best weapon against adversity. With each passing moment leading up to what promised to be an unforgettable day, Sam knew one thing. Whether or not anyone took him seriously wasn't important anymore. What mattered was taking back control over his life and having fun while doing it. Little did he know how this whimsical plan would soon spiral into something much bigger than any rubber chicken or inflatable plane could ever capture. With the concept of the airstrike against HOA Day firmly planted in his mind, Sam sprang into action, eager to turn his outrageous idea into a reality. He knew that for this event to truly resonate, he would need the support of friends, fellow farmers, and the local community. This would be a collective effort, and as he reached out to others, he found that many were just as fed up with the HOA's overreach as he was. Sam began by organizing a gathering at his farm. He sent out invitations via social media, local bulletin boards, and word of mouth, excitedly promoting the event as a day of fun and rebellion against the HOA. Join us for an epic airstrike against HOA Day. Bring your sense of humor and your pitchforks, he wrote in his post. The response was overwhelming. People were eager to participate in an event that promised laughter and camaraderie. On the day of the gathering, a motley crew of friends and supporters arrived at Sam's farm. Farmers from nearby fields brought their families. Neighbors showed up with baked goods and smiles, and even some curious onlookers came to see what all the fuss was about. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement, laughter ringing through the air like music. Sam gathered everyone together under the shade of an old oak tree, where he laid out his vision for the day. "All right, folks," he began with a grin, "this isn't just any ordinary day. Today we're staging our own airstrike. We'll show this HOA that we won't be bullied into submission." The crowd erupted into laughter, encouraging him as he outlined their plans. They discussed setting up inflatable planes around the farm, brightly colored decorations that would serve as both eye-catching visuals and playful symbols of their rebellion. Volunteers signed up for different tasks. Some would be responsible for crafting signs with slogans like "Farming is Freedom" and "Down with HOA," while others planned games like "Pin the Tail on the HOA" and a rubber chicken toss. As they brainstormed ideas for entertainment, creativity flowed freely. One local farmer suggested a pie-eating contest, joking that it would be a fitting way to show they were ready to take a slice out of HOA tyranny. Another chimed in with the idea of hosting a mock auction for airstrike supplies, which would include ridiculous items like rubber chickens and inflatable tanks, anything to keep things lighthearted while still making their point. The planning sessions turned into raucous events filled with laughter and camaraderie. They shared stories about their own run-ins with HOAs, about fines imposed for minor infractions or complaints filed over harmless activities. Each tale added fuel to their fire. It was clear that this wasn't just about Sam's battle anymore. It was about standing together against unnecessary rules dictating how they could live their lives. To further spread awareness and build excitement, Sam decided to create promotional materials for their Airstrike day. He enlisted the help of his neighbor's teenage daughter, who was tech-savvy enough to design colorful flyers and social media posts that captured the spirit of their cause. Images featuring cartoon planes flying over fields adorned with slogans filled everyone's feeds, drawing attention from people far beyond their immediate area. As preparations continued, Sam also reached out to local businesses for support. He visited nearby shops and cafes to see if they'd be willing to contribute food or prizes for games. To his delight, many owners were eager to help. After all, they recognized that a thriving farming community benefited everyone in town. With each passing day leading up to the event, excitement grew exponentially. Local media began picking up on the story as well. Reporters were intrigued by the idea of farmers fighting back against an HOA in such a humorous way. Interviews followed where Sam spoke passionately about his farm and what it meant to him, not just as a livelihood but as part of his identity. Finally, on the morning of Airstrike against HOA Day, everything was set. Colorful banners fluttered in the breeze as inflatable planes stood proudly throughout Sam's fields. Laughter echoed across the farm as families began arriving early to help finalize preparations, setting up tables laden with food and drinks while others worked on last-minute decorations. As Sam stood back taking it all in, his farm transformed into a whimsical battlefield of fun. He felt a renewed sense of hope bubbling within him. This wasn't just about poking fun at bureaucracy. It was about celebrating community spirit and resilience in the face of adversity. As noon approached and guests settled in for a day filled with games, laughter, and camaraderie rather than conflict or confrontation, Sam knew they had created something special together, the united front showcasing not only their frustration but also their unwavering commitment to living authentically as farmers. Little did anyone know that this seemingly lighthearted event would evolve into something much larger than any one person could have anticipated, a day destined to leave its mark on both their community and those who sought to silence them. The day of the airstrike against HOA Day dawned bright and clear, with the sun shining down over Sam's farm like a spotlight on a stage set for a grand performance. The air buzzed with excitement as families and friends gathered, dressed in t-shirts emblazoned with slogans like "Farmers Unite" and "Down with HOA." Inflatable planes bobbed in the breeze, colorful banners streamed across the fields, and the sound of laughter filled the air. As guests arrived, Sam couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. He moved through the crowd, greeting everyone with enthusiasm, engaging in friendly banter while keeping an eye on last-minute preparations. The farm had transformed into a carnival-like atmosphere, complete with games, food stalls, and even a makeshift command center where volunteers coordinated activities. The first event of the day was a rubber chicken toss, a simple yet hilariously absurd game where participants aimed to land their rubber poultry into inflatable targets shaped like miniature HOA houses. Laughter erupted as children and adults alike tossed chickens with varying degrees of skill, some managing to score points while others sent their fowl flying wildly off course. The competition was fierce but good-natured, with everyone cheering and teasing one another. Amidst the chaos, Sam took center stage for a brief moment, grabbing the microphone to address his guests. "Welcome to Airstrike against HOA Day," he declared, his voice booming over the excited chatter. "Today we show that we're proud farmers who won't be silenced by unreasonable demands. Let's have some fun." Cheers erupted from the crowd as he gestured toward the inflatable planes decorated with funny slogans. "And remember, this is all in good spirit. No actual airstrikes will occur today. Just good old-fashioned fun." The crowd roared with laughter at the reminder that this event was more about unity than hostility. As games continued throughout the day, Sam noticed a group of HOA members lurking at the edge of his property, watching from a distance. Their expressions were a mixture of confusion and disbelief, clearly taken aback by the spectacle unfolding before them. Margaret stood at the forefront, her arms crossed tightly as she observed what she considered an affront to community decorum. "Can you believe this?" she scoffed to her fellow board members. "This is ridiculous. They're making a mockery of our rules." One of her companions adjusted his glasses, trying to take in the scene. "But "Isn't it kind of amusing?" he replied hesitantly. "I mean, look at how many people are here." Margaret shot him a glare that could curdle milk. "We can't let this go unchecked. This is an outright defiance against our authority." Back among the festivities, Sam was having too much fun to care about Margaret and her crew. He joined in on various games and even participated in a pie-eating contest, his face smeared with whipped cream as he laughed alongside neighbors who cheered him on. With each passing hour, it became clearer that this was more than just a playful protest. It was an affirmation of community spirit. At one point during the festivities, Sam had orchestrated a comedic skit where he donned aviator sunglasses and pretended to pilot one of the inflatable planes. He mimicked radio chatter as if calling in an airstrike on imaginary targets. "Roger that. Target acquired. All paperwork related to unreasonable HOA fines." Laughter erupted from the crowd as he flailed around dramatically. Meanwhile, Margaret and her fellow HOA members remained rooted at their vantage point, their frustration mounting as they watched Sam's antics unfold. They exchanged whispers and glances filled with indignation. "This isn't just harmless fun. It's downright disrespectful," Margaret insisted. "We need to take action. This behavior cannot go unpunished." Just then, another member suggested that they should approach Sam directly and put an end to this chaos before it spiraled out of control. With a deep breath and her resolve solidified, Margaret led her small group toward Sam's gathering. As they approached, they were greeted by cheers from attendees who were unfazed by their presence. Sam spotted them first and grinned widely. "Look who decided to join us. Welcome to Airstrike Day. Care for a rubber chicken toss?" he called out playfully. Margaret's expression turned sour as she stepped forward, attempting to regain control of the situation. "This is completely inappropriate," she said sharply. "You can't just make a mockery of our regulations like this." Sam chuckled lightly. "Oh, come on. We're just having some fun here. Why don't you join us instead? We could use some more players in our chicken toss." His tone was lighthearted but carried an underlying message. He would not back down easily. Margaret opened her mouth to respond but found herself momentarily speechless as laughter erupted from those around her. The sheer absurdity of it all began to chip away at her stern demeanor. Suddenly, one enthusiastic child ran up holding 2 rubber chickens and offered one to Margaret as if inviting her into their world of playful rebellion. The sight was comical. A serious HOA member clutching a bright yellow rubber chicken amid laughter and joy around her. It was then that something shifted within Margaret. Perhaps it was the realization that they were outnumbered by voices advocating for community rather than division. Perhaps it was simply exhaustion from fighting an uphill battle against such spirited resilience. As the chaos continued around them, with games shifting into spontaneous dance-offs and laughter echoing through fields, Margaret sighed deeply and reluctantly accepted the chicken from the child's hands. A hesitant smile crept across her lips as she joined in on tossing it back towards Sam's direction. At that moment, amidst all the chaos and laughter surrounding Airstrike against HOA Day, something remarkable happened. Barriers began to break down between neighbors who had once been divided by misunderstandings and differing lifestyles. As festivities surged onward under sunny skies filled with laughter instead of hostility, Sam knew they had made their mark, not only on each other, but also in how they chose to stand together against adversity while embracing joy along the way. The aftermath of Airstrike against HOA Day reverberated throughout the community, sparking conversations that would last long after the inflatable planes were deflated and the laughter faded. As word spread about the event, it became clear that Sam's unconventional protest had struck a chord within the hearts of many. What began as a humorous spectacle had morphed into a rallying cry for those who felt stifled by the overreach of the HOA. In the days following the event, social media buzzed with activity. Photos and videos of the day flooded local feeds, showcasing smiling families tossing rubber chickens, children laughing while playing games, and even Margaret awkwardly participating in a chicken toss. The community embraced the spirit of the day, sharing their own stories of frustration with HOAs and expressing solidarity with Sam's stand against unreasonable rules. Local news outlets quickly caught wind of the story, producing segments that highlighted not just the antics of Airstrike Day, but also the underlying issues that prompted it. Reporters interviewed attendees who spoke passionately about their love for rural life and their desire to maintain a sense of community without undue interference from newcomers. Sam became an unexpected local hero, his determination resonating with many who felt similarly besieged by regulatory constraints. Headlines proclaimed phrases like "Farmer Fights Back," "Community Rallies Around Airstrike Against HOA Day," and "Humor Meets Resistance, Local Farmer Stages Hilarious Protest." The coverage painted Sam as a symbol of resilience against bureaucracy, a David standing up to Goliath. This newfound attention brought a mix of excitement and anxiety for Sam. He was thrilled to see his message being amplified, but also wary of how the HOA would react to his bold move. Meanwhile, Margaret and her fellow HOA members were not amused. In their eyes, what had occurred was not just harmless fun, but an outright challenge to their authority. They convened emergency meetings to discuss how best to respond to what they perceived as defiance. The atmosphere among the board members was tense, filled with indignation over how Sam had turned their regulations into fodder for public ridicule. Margaret took it upon herself to lead these discussions, adamant that they needed a strong response. "We can't let this behavior continue unchecked," she insisted during one meeting. "If we don't act now, we risk losing control over our community standards." As she spoke, some board members expressed concerns about escalating tensions further. They worried about alienating those who might sympathize with Sam's plight. A few even pointed out that calling attention to their restrictions might backfire and attract more supporters to his cause. But Margaret was unwavering. "We need to issue a statement denouncing this event," she declared. "We must remind everyone that our guidelines are in place for a reason, to protect property values and maintain peace." With her resolve strengthened, they drafted a public statement condemning Airstrike against HOA Day as an inappropriate and disrespectful affront to community decorum. It emphasized their commitment to enforcing regulations while asserting that such antics would not be tolerated in their neighborhood. When this statement was released, it only fueled further discussions within the community. The backlash against the HOA grew stronger as residents began sharing their thoughts on social media platforms. Many found Margaret's response overly harsh and out of touch with what they had witnessed during Airstrike Day, a joyful celebration rather than an affront. In contrast, Sam received messages from neighbors expressing gratitude for his efforts and solidarity from those who felt marginalized by the HOA's strict rules. People began organizing informal meetups where they could share ideas about how to foster community while balancing individual rights, conversations that had previously been stifled under fear of retribution from the HOA. As weeks passed and media coverage continued, Sam found himself invited to speak at local gatherings and farmers markets, where he passionately advocated for preserving rural lifestyles while promoting dialogue between neighbors. His message resonated deeply. He emphasized the importance of finding common ground despite differing perspectives. The fallout from Airstrike against HOA Day had sparked newfound energy within the community, not just among farmers, but also among families who cherish their right to live authentically without being constrained by overbearing regulations. Everyone began considering how they could collectively advocate for change without resorting to hostility or animosity. Ultimately, this period marked a turning point in Sam's life, a shift from simply defending his farm against an oppressive entity to embodying resilience and hope for many others facing similar challenges. As discussions unfolded around him about potential new approaches to community governance, ideas rooted in collaboration rather than confrontation, Sam felt invigorated by what lay ahead. Little did anyone realize that this grassroots movement would soon gain momentum beyond their small town. Ripples were forming across neighboring communities whose residents were inspired by Sam's courage. What started as an unconventional protest would soon evolve into something much larger, a force for change that challenged assumptions about HOAs everywhere. As the dust settled from the whirlwind of Airstrike against HOA Day, Sam found himself sitting on his porch one quiet evening, reflecting on the events that had transpired over the past few weeks. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a golden glow across his fields, and he felt a sense of calm wash over him. It was hard to believe how one day of whimsical protest had transformed not only his life but also the fabric of his community. In the aftermath of the event, Sam had witnessed something remarkable unfold. The initial laughter and chaos had given way to genuine conversations among neighbors, conversations that delve into what it meant to live in harmony while respecting individual freedoms. It was almost as if Airstrike Day had peeled back layers of tension that had long simmered beneath the surface, revealing a desire for connection and understanding. Sam thought about how he had felt cornered and helpless before staging his protest. The HOA's relentless demands had made him question not only his farming practices, but also his right to exist authentically in a place he cherished. Yet now, looking at the vibrant crops swaying in the evening breeze, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that standing up for himself had sparked a movement that resonated with many, people who felt similarly confined by rules imposed without consideration for their way of life. With each passing day, more residents were coming forward, sharing their own stories about oppressive regulations and experiences that echoed his own. Sam had become somewhat of an unlikely spokesperson, not just for farmers but for anyone who craved balance between community standards and personal freedom. He recalled attending meetings where neighbors openly discussed concerns about their HOA's authority, advocating for changes in how decisions were made and who got to influence those choices. As he sat in contemplative silence, sipping a glass of sweet tea, Sam couldn't help but smile at how far they had come since that fateful confrontation with Margaret. What had begun as a playful rebellion had blossomed into a larger dialogue about community values and individuality. It was empowering to see people taking ownership of their lives rather than allowing themselves to be dictated by others' expectations. However, amidst this newfound unity, Sam also reflected on the complexities that lay ahead. While he relished the support from neighbors, he knew change wouldn't happen overnight. The HOA still existed, and while they might be more cautious in their approach now, their influence lingered like a shadow over their discussions. He understood that genuine resolution required careful navigation, balancing respect for community guidelines while ensuring the voices of individuals were heard and valued. In thinking about Margaret specifically, Sam felt a twinge of empathy. She had been adamant about maintaining order within the neighborhood, a mission she believed in passionately. Perhaps if she saw beyond her rigid stance on regulations, she could find common ground with those she sought to control. Sam resolved to reach out to her again, not with animosity, but with an olive branch, a sincere invitation to engage in dialogue about finding solutions together. As summer began to wane and autumn approached, he envisioned hosting another gathering, a community forum where everyone could voice opinions openly and brainstorm ideas for enhancing their neighborhood governance without stifling creativity or individuality. This time it would be less about playful antics and more focused on constructive discussions that fostered collaboration and mutual understanding. With hope swelling within him, Sam grabbed his notebook and began drafting ideas for this new gathering. He wanted to include topics like establishing a committee for community input on HOA regulations or creating events that celebrated local farmers while educating newcomers about sustainable practices. He envisioned inviting Margaret as well, offering her an opportunity to share her perspective while listening to others in an environment free from judgment. As he penned down these thoughts, a sense of clarity washed over him. Change begins with conversation and empathy. He realized that by allowing space for diverse voices within their community, whether they aligned with traditional values or embraced modern practices, they could create an environment where everyone felt valued. Sam knew there would be challenges ahead, resistance from those who preferred maintaining the status quo. But he was ready to face them head-on with determination rooted in love for his land and community. The experiences over the past few months had taught him invaluable lessons about resilience, unity, and standing firm in one's beliefs while embracing collaboration. With renewed energy coursing through him, Sam closed his notebook and stood up from the porch. He looked out over his fields one last time before heading inside. The sun slowly slipped beneath the horizon as stars began twinkling overhead, a reminder that even amidst darkness, possibilities for light remained. As Sam prepared for this next chapter, one defined by reflection, resolution, and open dialogue, he couldn't help but feel excited about what lay ahead. In reclaiming his identity as both a farmer and a neighbor within this evolving community, he understood that perhaps true victory wasn't merely about winning battles against bureaucracy but fostering connections that transcended differences, connections grounded in mutual respect and shared aspirations for bright futures together. Little did he know just how impactful these efforts would become, not only for him but also for countless others seeking clarity amid chaos as they navigated life's complexities together. In the months following Airstrike against HOA Day, the atmosphere within the community shifted significantly. What had once been a battleground of tension and misunderstanding gradually transformed into a landscape of dialogue and collaboration. Sam stood at the center of this change, witnessing how standing up for one's rights could pave the way for genuine connection and understanding. As the community forum Sam had envisioned took shape, it became a platform for open discussions about shared goals and concerns. The event attracted a diverse crowd: farmers, families, newcomers, and even HOA members, including Margaret. With refreshments laid out on tables adorned with local produce, attendees mingled and exchanged stories, creating a warm atmosphere that felt more like a celebration than a confrontation. Margaret arrived with a mix of trepidation and determination. She had spent weeks reflecting on her approach to community governance and was willing to engage in meaningful dialogue. As she entered the venue, she was greeted with cautious smiles and nods, signaling that perhaps this gathering could be a turning point for her as well. Sam welcomed everyone with enthusiasm, outlining the purpose of the forum: to foster understanding between different perspectives while seeking solutions that respected both individual rights and community standards. As he spoke, he noticed Margaret listening intently, her expression softening as she absorbed the stories shared by those around her. Throughout the evening, various residents took turns voicing their opinions, sharing experiences of frustration with HOA regulations, but also expressing appreciation for the sense of community they had cultivated together. Conversations flowed freely, touching on topics like how to balance property aesthetics with personal freedoms and ways to promote local farming without alienating newcomers. When it was Margaret's turn to speak, Sam held his breath. He knew this moment could shape the future of their interactions. She stepped up to the microphone, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I came into this role believing that maintaining order and standards was my responsibility," she began. "But I realize now that my approach may have stifled voices instead of fostering unity." The room fell silent as attendees processed her words. "I've seen how important it is for each of you to feel heard and respected," she continued. "I want to work together with all of you, not against you, to find a way forward that values both our community's aesthetics and your rights as individuals." A ripple of applause erupted in response to her honesty, a moment that underscored how far they had come since those initial confrontations filled with conflict. In that instant, barriers began to dissolve. What remained were conversations grounded in empathy and understanding. As discussions continued over the following weeks, Sam found himself collaborating closely with Margaret and other HOA members to reevaluate some of their regulations. They introduced new initiatives aimed at encouraging sustainable farming practices while still addressing valid concerns about property values and neighborhood harmony. Regular meetings were scheduled to allow residents to voice their views on ongoing issues, an opportunity for everyone's input to shape decisions moving forward. This newfound partnership not only improved relations between Sam and the HOA, but also fostered deeper connections within the community as a whole. Neighbors began organizing joint events, farmers markets featuring local produce alongside crafts from nearby artisans, creating an environment where everyone felt invested in each other's success. Through these initiatives, Sam saw firsthand how standing up for one's rights could lead to meaningful change when approached with respect and openness. He reflected on his journey from feeling isolated on his farm to becoming an advocate for collaboration among diverse voices, a transition that breathed life back into his sense of belonging within the community. As months turned into seasons, Sam found joy in cultivating not only his crops but also relationships built on trust and understanding. The once contentious dynamics between farmers and HOA members evolved into friendships characterized by shared goals, preserving their rural heritage while embracing growth and development in a manner that honored individual rights. Looking back on Airstrike against HOA Day, Sam couldn't help but chuckle at how something so whimsical had sparked an awakening within his community. It was a reminder that humor could be a powerful catalyst for change, one capable of breaking down walls built on misunderstanding. In time, even Margaret became an advocate for fostering connections between residents, attending gatherings not only as an HOA representative, but also as a neighbor who genuinely cared about preserving the spirit of rural living. Her participation signaled an evolution in leadership, one grounded in collaboration rather than authority. Ultimately, Sam realized that standing up for one's rights didn't mean fighting alone. It meant inviting others into conversations where possibilities emerged through shared experiences. The evolution of his relationship with the HOA served as testament to this truth, a reminder that when people come together with open hearts and minds, they can create communities where everyone thrives. As he tended to his fields each day under expansive skies filled with promise, Sam felt grateful for what lay ahead, a future woven together by threads of resilience, understanding, and unity among those who called this land home. Little did they know how many more journeys awaited them, adventures rooted in love for both land and neighbor alike.